The Strange Case of Cabin 22. Dave took the turns on the mountain road slow. He just passed a sign that read, "Beware of falling rock." What did that even mean? What are you supposed to do if rocks start falling out of the sky while you're driving? That would be just about right to finish off this week, he said out loud to nothing, and he finished the thought in his head. Man crushed by rock. Mrs. Divorce hearing. Widow gets dog. As far as Dave was concerned, his buddy Rage, a large black shepherd, was his most valuable possession. He reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror to look into the back seat at his sleeping friend, and spoke out loud again. "No worries. She can have the house, but she's not getting you. We're almost there, buddy." And Rage seemed to react to this in a positive way, and sat up, tongue gleefully hanging out of the side of his mouth, wide awake and alert to his friend's voice. Dave Weaver was joining the ranks of the unaffected husband, soon to be bachelor squad. Odd how you can grow so apart from a spouse that the space between you grows past the point of caring and does a deadfall into just make it over territory. This 2-week trip proved to be a lifesaver into this mountain majesty of Montesano Mountain's beauty and solitude was just what he needed. He had rented a cabin there, and Mr. McGee, the owner of the property, said there was good fishing, even late into the fall, and the scenery was a healing in a way. And added this southern beauty, "You just come on up and leave your troubles and ex-wife down in the valley. Bless her heart." Ex-wife, he thought out loud. Gotta get used to that one, Rage. Rage, reacting again to his comment, moved into the passenger seat and stuck his head out of the window. Dave patted him on the back and thought to himself, he filled that position just fine. They made their way up the winding road and toward the cabins. Dave found the turnoff sign that said Montesano Lodge and Cabins. A little way up the road, he passed a sign to his left that said, "To RV Park, turn here." And remember, he was told to pass that one. "On up the road a piece, you'll see the sign for the cabins." And he did. He could see the clearing and the large building up ahead and pulled up to the manager's office. A large cabin lodge with a sign that hung on one side of what looked like a little general store. It swung from the green metal roof and declared, "Fresh biscuits every morning." It actually had apostrophes in the place of the E in every and the G in morning. He was getting used to this southern charm and loved that it was freely offered in conversation unapologetically. And in his state of mind leaving the city rush of New York, he just loved it. He had taken a new job in Huntsville and had a month to shake off his past and start new. He pulled up to the other end of the beautifully built lodge. The pecan-colored logs with gray-looking cement between each one looked like it was built by the hands of Paul Bunyan himself, and he laughed at that thought. "Guess I have to brush up on my southern legends, boy." He smiled and ruffed the fur of the dog's head. "Stay here. I will be just a minute." He walked up to the door that was bookended by a 6-foot Indian chief carved out of a log, offering him a red and white peppermint candy with one outstretched hand. Odd combo, he thought. On the other side, a totem pole, just as high, with 4 faces carved into the wood, one each more grotesque than the other. "Nice work," he said to it out loud and gave it a nod, as he walked through the door to the office. A little bell above tinged at the opening and closing of the door. The theme continued in here with a huge carving of a bear, in a quaint lobby with a picture of Indians on its endless ride into a battle long over. Another on the side wall covered a cozy-looking teepee by a lake with a glow from inside that seemed so nice right about now, and a large oil painting of an Indian chief over a brown leather couch. He saw no one behind the counter and called out, Mr. McGee? He heard a rustle from the wall behind the big bear. Mrs., you must be Mr. Weaver from the big city. An older woman emerged into the view, and Dave smiled. Guilty, he joked. She was one of the most comfortably put together people he had ever seen. She wore a dress of blue with a white flower print, short curly gray hair, and naturally pink cheeks under the bluest eyes framed by little gold-rimmed glasses. She transferred her knitting into one hand and extended the other toward him, and he shook it. I'm Mrs. McGee. Mr. McGee is out back putting the finishing touches on my eagle. Your eagle? He asked as he smiled. He just loved her demeanor. Oh, yes, he's always carving with that noisemaker of his. I bet him one of my strawberry rhubarb pies he couldn't make me an eagle. Dave laughed at this a bit. He was starting to understand. Looks like I'm going to be doing some extra baking. It's coming along right good. They both chuckled at this. Well, you don't need to stand here a-jawing your day away with me. You'll be wanting your key and getting to the fishing. You got your dog with you. Mr. McGee says you got a buddy with you. Startled a bit at this, he thought it was okay and said, Yes, Rage. He's in the car. That okay? He had hoped. Oh, sure. She waved a hand in a forget-about-it gesture. We love pets. You catch up after him and don't let him bother the other guests or chase my cat Fritz there, and we won't have no problems. She gestured toward a tall bookcase where a large, beautiful black Persian cat laid on the very top of it. It was staring right at him with green eyes. It flitted its tail as if to say to Dave, That's right, don't start none, won't be none. And Dave laughed. He is very well behaved, ma'am. Good. Glad to hear it. Plenty of wide open space for him to run round here. You both will enjoy your stay. 2 weeks, is it? Yes, ma'am. 2 weeks. Gonna relax, do some reading, and of course some fishing. Well, good place for it. There's fresh bait every day in the vending machine. Worms, mostly. The vending machine? He asked, never hearing of such a thing. A worm machine? And just smiled. Yup, Mr. McGee sells chicken livers in the storefront cooler, but I'm not letting those worms in my shop. Machines round back takes quarters, or you can dig your own. He did chuckle out loud at this as she pushed an index card and a pen toward him and turned around to a board with gold hooks and keys hanging from it. Just put your address, phone, license plate number, and the dates you're staying on the card. Of course, your name, too. I'll be needing your driver's license as well. Keep it legal-like. You're all paid up, Mr. McGee said. He shook his head at the simple check-in and thought he could get used to this trusting thing. How quaint it all was, and started to fill out the card. There's a small fridge in the cabin and some sundries in the shop. I try to keep hot dogs and fresh hamburger meat, and there are always fresh pies and biscuits and sausage in the mornings if you have the need. My canned goods, too. If you go hungry round here, it'll be your own fault, Mr. Weaver. You can call me Dave. He smiled. And you can call me Mrs. McGee. She smiled and placed the key on the card, and he had just finished. The key read number 22, faded, gold print. It is down the path to the right. You won't have problem finding it. Shop closes at 10 p.m. sharp. But if you find the need, Mr. McGee is usually up at his fire pit out back. If you see the smoke, he's there, and he can get what you need. But don't make it a habit. She smiled. Ding! A sound went off behind her from an unseen room. There's my pies. Fresh apple and pecan today, Mr. Dave. He took a deep breath in. He could smell the apple pie, and it warmed his heart. Funny how smells could do that. Ting, ting! A different bell behind him. The doorbell, so to speak. A large man in overalls and faded red t-shirt darkened the door with his sighs. I finished that sink faucet, Mrs. McGee. Well, thank you, Tater, she smiled. There's a loose board on the front porch of 11 and a bad hinge on the screen door of number 3, if you'd be so kind. Sure thing, he offered as she took down the keys to those cabin numbers. Tater. Oh, these names, Dave thought. Almost shuffled, head down, as he put one key down on the counter that had a 22 on it, and picked up the other 2 keys. Right on it, Mrs. Sam. And he shuffled out as slowly as he came in, never even looking at Dave, leaving the tinging bell behind him. Whoa, he's a big guy, Dave said almost without realizing it. Oh, yes. Tater's heart is as big as he is. Tater Daniels. He's our caretaker. Lives out in the cabin behind the lodge. Known him and his family, for years. She offered and then swatted a hand in his direction. But you don't need to bother with all that. You need to get on to your fishing, and I need to get to my pies. He thanked her and tinged the bell on his exit. Oh, Dave. He stopped at her voice and turned around. You're not one of those jittery city people, are you? He had no idea what she meant, and his face probably said so because she finished with this. I mean, the woods out here. They have some scary sounds you may not be used to. Things go bump in the night around here. She laughed at this a bit, like it was a joke, and he smiled. Don't you get caught up in all that gossip either. Ain't nothing in my cabins or these woods that God himself didn't put here. You'd be wise to remember that, Dave. This seemed odd to him, but he thanked her and gave her a little wave and a nod as he went out the door. Without even thinking, he took a peppermint from the Indian's outstretched hand and said thanks to the statue. Getting in the car, he was greeted by Rage, who amused himself at his absence by watching a taunting squirrel in a nearby tree. Hey, boy, he said, getting in, and chuckled at the thought of Rage having some fun here, too, chasing squirrels and rabbits on the trails he had read about, and pet the dog as he moved back over to the pasture side. You get to have all the fun you want, I'm told. Just leave that cat in there alone. That one looks like trouble. He laughed as he unwrapped the peppermint. His waiting friend started to actually drool a bit, watching him. Rage loved candy, of all kinds, and he palmed the mint and offered it to his friend. Here you go, boy. We're on vacation. All diets are off. Rage ate it with 2 crunches, and they drove down the dirt road toward the cabins. Dave parked to the side of the little cabin, set far off the road. It almost looked like it hung on a cliffside of the mountain. The scene was breathtaking. There was a little roofed porch with a pile of firewood on one side, and yes, a rocking chair too. Log handmade railings surrounded the porch, and a screen door in faded green paint, a gold number 22 at its right. A lantern hung on a black wrought iron hook above it. Kerosene, he thought. and marveled at the cabin's simple elegance. "Let's go in and see, boy," he said to Rage as they both got out of the car. Rage ran right up to the tree in the very front of the yard and took a long pee on it. "Well, it's official," Dave said. "It's ours now." And he laughed. He took the key out of his jeans pocket and walked up to the screen door, opened it, and inserted the key into the old lock on the door. It stuck a bit, and he quick pulled back his hand from the knob. Had it just turned in his hand? "Don't be silly," he thought, as he reached for it again, jiggled the key, and it gave way. He opened the front door to the huge room. "Come on, boy." Rage ran past him into the room and started sniffing everything in his sight. There was a large brown leather sofa, complete with knitted afghan he was sure was handmade by Mrs. McGee. A huge fireplace with an iron hook inside for heating up pot full of stew, he surmised. There was 2 small rooms to his right, bedrooms, he guessed, and the bathroom, called a half bath by Mr. McGee on the phone call they had had. "Showers are down by the lodge. 4 stalls in there, hottest water on the mountain. Open all night if you choose, but there's a commode in the cabin, running water, gas stove in the kitchen, but no electric. Kerosene lanterns are provided, and a barbecue on the back porch runs on propane. There's a small fridge I run on a gas generator out back. I'll turn that on and get her cold for you before you stay." All that was just fine with Dave, and 0 phone service out here was okay with him too. He had talked enough with lawyers and his soon-to-be ex for a while, and remembered there's a landline in the office if need arises, also part of his conversation with the soft-spoken owner of this gorgeous property. The picture window in the back of the cabin overtook his vision. The view was breathtaking, and he started toward it to get a better look. He walked right into an invisible cloud of stench. The smell that overtook his nostrils was overwhelming. It was a thick smell of death and decay, mixed with a wet, mucky odor. "Whoa," he said as he reached back behind him to reopen the door and get some air in there. "Oh, must have been closed up for a while," he said to Rage as the dog emerged from a back room and sat down by the fireplace. "You see a dead squirrel in there? Oh, man, that's bad." He moved toward the window, holding his nose, and looked to see which one opened. He found 2 smaller ones on the sides of the big picture window that did just that. He dropped his gym bag and he threw them open to their screens. A lovely mountain's fresh air poured in, and he took a deep breath. "Gonna be a bit to get that stench out," he said to Rage, who was now on the couch, seeming to pick out his favorite spots in their new digs. Dave leaned on the windowsill to breathe in again. As he did, he looked into the tiny kitchen with its small gas stove and tiny fridge on the counter, running as promised. The cabinets matched the wood grain paneling throughout the cabin's decor. There were many of them compared to the size of the kitchen, and every one of them had its doors wide open. The provided pots and pans spilled out onto the floor, and there were plastic cups on the counter and silverware spread all over its surface, and the matching drawers hung open and yawned out dish towels like tongues from wooden mouths. Some welcome, Dave thought, and he remembered the key Tater turned in at the office. It said 22. Man, he had just left here. And he fixed the sink faucet, he said. Why would he leave it like this? He questioned out loud to Rage, that was now in one chair in the room, in the room and looking out the window. Some view, huh, buddy? And this made Dave smile. He quick picked up the pans and threw them into the cabinets and swished the cups and eating utensils into the small sink with his arm. I'll be washing those, he said, and finished closing the drawers and cabinets, opened the fridge, and stuck his hand in it. And it was cold. All good there, he mused. Hey, boy, you hungry? He called to the dog, still looking out the window. The mountain's trees were filled with fall's colors, and Rage would love this, he thought, as much as he would. The last bit of work ahead was to unload the truck. He thought now about the few groceries he had quickly grabbed before the ride up. Rage's favorite canned food, one of the 5 cases now filling the back of his SUV. The other 4 cases were Boston Lager, and he planned on drinking every single one of them. Come on, boy. Let's go get some air. Stay close. We will go run later. With the moves of a dog that understood every word Dave said, and there really was no proof that he didn't really, Rage jumped down and headed toward the door, and they both headed to unload the truck. Staring at the contents of the truck, Dave was actually winding down a bit, he felt, and thought he'd not rush this. He was on vacation, after all. The things he packed were minimal, all of his real belongings in a storage unit closer to his new job down in Huntsville. What he had here was Dave's vacation gear. 2 fishing poles, a tackle box, a pair of heavy boots, a down coat, his gym bag with a few jeans, t-shirts, a flannel shirt or 2, several pairs of those boxers his ex-wife, hated, and shaving and other toiletries. He touched his face and thought, hell, I may not even shave for a while. What you think, boy? He looked at Rage, who was laying on the dirt drive, chewing on a pine cone between his paws. Oh, man, don't eat that. He reached down. Give it here, boy. And Rage stood up and seemed to look past him. A slight growl came from his throat. Dave quick slipped a hand under his collar instinctively and looked in the direction that had Rage's focus. What do you see, boy? And Dave caught a glimpse of a large black mist floating just above the ground, coming from behind the cabin and moving into the tree line. He stretched to see it as it faded into the deeper thickness of the woods and out of sight. What the hell? Rage just growled, a longer disapproving thought all his own in response. I know, buddy, right? I don't like it either. Smoke from a barbecue, maybe? A swarm of flies? Dave had no idea, really, and said so. I don't know, but we'll stay away from it, okay, buddy? Rage's tail wagged a bit now, and he let go the collar as he said, Let's eat. He turned to the truck now to decide what to bring in. The bag of steaks, canned beans, and coffee he brought. For sure, the case of Royal Canin beef for shepherds. Stuff costs more than the steaks, he thought, and smiled, and a case of beer. Come on, boy, let's fire up that grill. Rage trotted off toward the front door, and Dave gave a glancing look toward the tree line, and it gave him an uneasy feeling. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but he was up here all alone, really, and just then he was glad he had brought that 12-gauge, and he was even happier right now about the beer. The steak smelled great, a damn sight better than it did in the cabin for sure. The beer was warm, but he put some to chill in the fridge, and it was just fine for now. Rage ate his canned beef without chewing it, it seemed, and he knew what he had set his sights on was that T-bone he was promised on the road on the way up. It never ceased to amaze him how damn smart this dog was. Dave smiled as he flipped one of the steaks over and asked his buddy, How would you like your steak, sir? Medium? Medium rare? Dave smiled at the look on Rage's face when he turned it up to look at him. His ears perked up, and his eyes seemed to sparkle. Ha! Rare it is, monsieur. He laughed at this. He was feeling better, and you can best bet he bought Rage a T-bone. Bought several of them. This dog and this move was saving his life, he felt. and I'd rather have the money go to what he wanted for a change. His wife was getting plenty. She had seemed to go batshit crazy after speaking to that ambulance-chasing lawyer of hers, and he was hurt, really. You want anything else, buddy? A Porsche, maybe? Rage just tossed his head to one side, as if to say, Can I? Dave chuckled and finished off the beer, and leaned it against the railing that rounded the whole back porch. One down, he said, and reached out to open the screen door. A large thud seemed to come from inside the cabin, and Dave threw open the door, and they both ran in, thinking the darn roof fell in. What the? Dave stood with his hand on his forehead, looking around the large room. Nothing, he thought. Nothing? He checked the other rooms. The simple cots and old dressers in each room were all intact. Not a thing out of place. And he went to the front porch and looked all around. That sounded like an elephant came through the roof, buddy. But Rage hadn't followed him outside, and he quick ran up the walk and into the cabin to make sure all was okay. Rage! He called out, and he heard his bark from one of the back rooms. He ran in that direction, and Rage was there, about 3 feet from the back corner of the room, his hair standing up on the back of his neck, leaning forward in a growl mixed with barks, meaning he didn't like what he was seeing. Rage? What's there? As if the dog could explain, Rage just kept on with his protest as he backed up between that corner and Dave. In a lower voice now, What's there, boy? What do you see? As if to signal it was gone, Rage just sat down at his feet and started to pant, his tongue leaning out one side, saying, whatever it was gone. What the hell, man? Dave said aloud as he walked toward the corner and touched the wall. He didn't know what to expect, but he did it anyway. It was ice cold. Oh, Dave shook this off. Just an eerie, chilling, goosebump-raising feeling went through his body all at once, and he quick pulled his hand away. Come on, boy. That's enough of that. Steak! He said the last with a guttural humor, like a primal man speak, for red meat eaters. Rage understood, and off they went. Dave paused just a second before returning to the barbecue on the porch, grabbed a colder beer from the fridge, and realized the smell. It was completely gone. 4 beers later, and full stomachs to boot, the pair enjoyed the descending sun beyond the waterfall of trees in the distance. Rage chewing on what was left of his bone, and Dave halfway through a chapter of one of his new books. He had grabbed several at the Target when he bought the steaks. This one on a whim that seemed to fit his mood. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Mark Manson. He had laughed when he saw the title and grabbed it with his usual thriller crime novels. It was turning out to be a self-help, life-coaching thing, and not too bad. But he thought he'd finish the night with Grisham's The Whistler. He had heard a rustling off the porch, somewhere in the deep leaves below, and he took his feet down off the railing and looked down. He saw a deer jumping through off to the wood and thought it had been a long time since he had seen one. He was never into hunting. Fishing was as far as it went for Dave, and he and Rage watched it as it disappeared into the deep woods. It was almost dizzying to look down off the porch. It had been built to jut off the edge of the rock on the mountain for a full effect of the scenery there, and it worked for sure. But looking down, it made Dave think twice on trusting that railing, and he backed up off it quick and shuddered at the thought of taking an unwanted dive off of it. Okay, boy, I'm getting the rest of my stuff out of the truck. You want to pee? He went into the cabin, and Dave thought for a second, reached into his gym bag, and got out a long black leash, and Rage just gave him a look. I know, buddy, But if you start running after a deer out here, I won't find you in the dark." And he clipped it on Rage's collar, and off they went. He grabbed the shotgun he had wrapped in a sleeping bag and threw another canvas bag over his shoulder. He had got him an old coffee kettle to use on the stove, and he drank it black, so that's all the morning start he needed. Rage's favorite water bowl was in there, with a couple of flashlights, batteries, and his old transistor radio. Some snacks and other stuff he grabbed. "Okay, boy, the other stuff can wait till morning." And he locked the truck. Walking up to the cabin, he heard a scream. A loud, blood-curdling one. Rage heard it too. It sounded like it came from down the path toward the number 20 and number 19 cabin spots. Again it came, now sounding like it was further up the path, toward the number 24 and 25 spots. "What in the world is happening around here?" he said to the air. He had heard some birds out here can sound like someone screaming. Red foxes, too. Man, it had to be to move like that, he thought. Eerie, just the same. Sure sounded like a scream, he said to Rage. As they reached the porch, he heard it again, behind them now. They both hurried in the door and locked it. He leaned against the door for a moment. What in the hell was that? He dropped the bag and unrolled the 12-gauge on the counter, located the box of shells from his gym bag, and loaded it. While doing so, he remembered Mrs. McGee's words. "The woods out here have some scary sounds you may not be used to. Things go bump in the night around here." "Huh, I guess so. Gonna be a hell of a night, boy," Dave said, and Rage looked up. "It's okay, though. We have Dad's old Betty and each other. What could get us here?" All three of them settled onto the couch, Dave, Rage, and the 12-gauge. After making a roaring fire, and still very full from the steaks they had, they enjoyed sharing the pork rinds anyway. The new Grisham novel in hand, all seemed to feel a little bit better now. The warm fire and the crackling fireplace just felt right. The couch was comfy, and Rage was full and happy, and satisfied with taking one for every 2 pork rinds that Dave ate. And neither one of them noticed the face staring at them from the window off the back porch. You have been listening to The Strange Case of Captain 22. Stay tuned for part 2. Will Dave and Rage finally realize there is a strange face peering at them from the back porch? A porch that hangs a feet above the side of a mountain. Will the odd events continue in the little cozy hideaway? What will Dave find out about the odd occurrences in the little cabin village he has booked his stay in? Were the screams he and Rage heard just a fox, or is there more going on under the fall canopy of these woods? Tune in and find out. The Strange Case of Cabin 22. Dave took the turns on the mountain road slow. He just passed a sign that read, "Beware of falling rock." What did that even mean?